Shalom, welcome back to a Biselleh Torah. This week is called Aharay, which means after the death. And next week's Parsha, which is sometimes conjoined with this week's, is called Kedoshim. And when they are tied together, the name of the Parshiot become Aharay Kedoshim, meaning after death comes holiness. The death which is referred to in the first Parsha is the death of Aaron's two sons, Nadav and Avihu. And while the death is surely regrettable and painful for all of Israel, as most of all for Aaron, their names, the two names of Aaron's sons, are inscribed forever and to be repeated forever throughout time, despite the fact that they died too early. It is in this context that I want to share a sacred moment with you. Several years ago, I was in Mount Herzl, in the midst of Jerusalem, the cemetery where all the greatest luminaries that have led Israel and have supported the creation of the State of Israel are interred. And I looked at all of the names, familiar names through history books, and then I came across one which was puzzling, a name, Avshalom Feinberg. I wanted to find out who this man was that was buried with all of these people out of history books. It turns out he was born in the late 1800s, and while he was a poet, an artist by trade, he was recruited by an organization called Nili, which stands for Netzach Israel, Israel shall not be defeated, to bring Jews from persecuted lands into the land of Israel, despite the opposition of the Ottoman Empire, which held rule over Israel at that time. He tried to seek passageways, especially since he was fluent in Arabic, with people who were on the ground. And he went to Cairo to try to figure out the best byways. And he was leading a footpath through the Sinai Desert in 1917 when he disappeared. As it turns out, Avshalom Feinberg was set upon by Bedouin bandits, and he was murdered in the desert, and they buried his body in the sand. That was 1917. In 1967, right after the Six-Day War, one Israeli policeman was scouting the desert and came across a very odd sight. Palm trees growing out of sand. Should have been an oasis, but there was nothing there. Simply palm trees growing. So this policeman dug to try to find out the source of where these palm trees were being nourished and came across a skeleton, a body. And this body belonged to Avshalom Feinberg, who was walking through the desert. To sustain him, he carried dates in his pocket. Those dates, when he was buried in the sand, became fertilized by his own body. And ultimately palms sprung out of the desert sand to cover his body like a matzevah, like a testament, a monument, an eternal resting place for Avshalom Feinberg. But that's not the end of the story. When his body was discovered, his identity was discovered, they disinterred him from the middle of this desert in Rafah, in the middle of the Sinai Desert, and brought him to Har Herzl. There laid him to rest right next to Golda Meir and all the other famous names that you know by heart. When you go to Israel, you can see his name for yourself and say a prayer by his matzevah, by his monument. But the story has implications that far exceed this. For in the Torah reading we had Aharay Kedoshim. If you've ever been touched by death and who has not been singed by the angel of death, has it ever happened that you've discovered things about the person that has passed away that you never knew? Accomplishments that they did? People whom they saved? Abilities that they never revealed? I'm sure it's happened many times over, and certainly in my lifetime I've seen it more times than I can possibly count. That people are astounded when others come forward and say, after their death, I wanted to share with you a story about their life that I never knew, and everyone's face is riveted and their mouths drop open in awe. Aharay Kedoshim. After one's death, things are revealed that were secreted before, and maybe even by the person that did them, they'd long forgotten what they did, but the recipient, no. You do many things, good and wondrous during your life. A kind word to somebody who's bent over. Some food handed over to somebody who is hungry. A nice word to somebody who's looking all alone, perhaps sitting in the synagogue by himself. You go over and you say, hi. You introduce yourself and how are you? Little acts of tzedakah, of charity, of kindness that we do are countless during the course of our life. We've saved lives without ever, in fact, knowing the lives that we have saved by the gentle acts that we've done. Sometimes a phone call, for no reason other than you're thinking of somebody, may in fact save someone's life when they feel desperate, out of control, and that nobody cares about them at all. It may not come to be that during our life we are rewarded for the many acts of goodness that we do, but never cease, never give up, never stop, because everything, as the Talmud says, is recorded in a book whose words will never be erased. And those books are part of what will accompany your soul next to the great magistrate when we graduate from this universe into the next. Aharay Mot Kedoshim. And they will speak of our life, great acts of holiness that we have done. Continue, just like the sons of Aaron, just like Avshalom Feinberg, just like you. Shabbat Shalom.